Okay guys, let's spend a little bit of time talking about these. These are spool pins, and I've had a lot of questions about how to know if you've got spool pins, how do you know if you're dealing with them, and how do you deal with them. Now these are just some examples. You can see the one on the far left has a thicker base on it. The one in the middle has, I think, a thick base, a little bit thicker, and then a pretty thin top. And then the one on the far right is thin top and then a pretty thin bottom. And you know what? I don't even know why I'm telling you this, because it absolutely doesn't matter when it comes time to pick these things. They all pick identically. So let's spend just a little bit of time talking about how do you know if you have spool pins, and then I'm going to show how do you detect them, and then of course how do you handle them. Now I agonized over this. I did watch several videos where people were trying to talk about what it is that they feel. They would hold a lock in their hand and then you would see some mysterious movements and feedback, etc. And then suddenly the lock would open, and then they would say, oh yeah, by the way, it contained 4 spools. And you know, to me that wasn't so useful. So how do you know if you're dealing with spools? Well, the first thing you need to do, we need to detect them. Well, let's take a look. Here we have a lock. It's a 5-pin lock. It's a generic, so no name on it. Normally when they put spool pins or any kind of security pins inside of one of these locks, they're, in the case of 5-pin or like this one, they'll put 4 security pins and then they'll put 1 standard pin, 1 standard driver. And this one I've loaded up, so you can see I've loaded it up with 5 spool pins. Now let's just take a look at what happens. When the spool pin is at the shear line, and let me grab tweezers and show you what I'm talking about here. Inside of there, all of the springs are pushing the key pins down so they can interact with the key, and of course they're pushing your driver pins down as well. And they push it down so that the thin part of the spool, I mean that's why they call it a spool, it looks like a spool of thread, thick on 2 ends and thin in the middle. Well, you can see if we push the spool, that thin part, down to the shear line, there's a lot of slop in there. So the way you might detect it, if you have all spool pins, I'm just going to turn it so I can get access, is that it flops around. Your core, now there's 5 spool pins in here. It looks like it's almost ready to open, but there are 5 spool pins holding it in place. And this is why they don't do it, because there's just too much slop in it. Now if we have another lock, and here is an identical one, same, it's a brother of the one I just showed you. This one is also loaded with 5 pins. Only 4 of them are spool, and 1 of them is a standard pin. In fact, I'll tell you, it's the last one. And the reason they do that is because all the 4 spool pins, they're still right there at that shear line, but that standard pin, being standard thickness, the entire length of the body, it is going to fill up the plug, and we're only going to get just a little bit of play. And most locks will have just a little bit of slop like this one, but it is in no way compares to this one that contains all the spools. There's just a lot of play in there. It'd be easy to get some leverage on this and perhaps cause internal damage. So that's why they don't do it. Alright, so what are we going to do here? Well, I've showed you how to detect if you have spool pins inside of here, or all spool pins, but we don't always know that. So we have to have another way to detect the spools. So I've got a little jig rigged up here, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to clamp up this lock inside of the clamp here, and then I've rigged up a little device. It's nothing but a tension wrench, and we're going to use top of the tension keyway. I'm going to stick it in there, and I'm not so worried right now about getting adjusted. We'll take a break for that. And then I'm going to put a small weight on it, and then I will adjust it, and I'll change the angle of the camera so that our pointer is right at 0. And then we're going to proceed to pick this lock. And instead of trying to tell you what it is I'm feeling on my finger, hopefully you'll be able to see on this indicator here. You'll know when we detect a spool, you'll know when I'm starting to pick it, and therefore you will know how to pick it. You'll know what to feel for, and you'll know how to deal with spools. So if you'll give me just a few minutes, I'll change the angle of the camera, I'll get everything zeroed up, and then we'll see if we can't pick this thing. So I'll be right back. Alright, here we go. I've got it zeroed, as close to 0 as I can get that little indicator. And hanging, I just got a little notch on this to keep our weight from sliding around. It's really nothing more than a washer, just to keep a little bit of downward tension on the tension wrench. And then I just stuck it in the top of the keyway. Now, just like all security locks, the first thing we need to do, we need to get ourselves a fault set. That's the first step. Without a fault set, we're going nowhere. Well, we know that once we drop that standard pin, or we put him to the shear line, then we're going to get a fault set, because the other 4 pins in this lock, as I told you, are spools. So let's go ahead and go to the back of the keyway. I told you it's pin number 5. Position ourselves and watch the needle. When we pop that last pin, we should get ourselves a fault set. If it'll stop bouncing just a little. Now you can see we're down around -1. So you would have definitely felt that with your finger if you were doing the tension with your finger if you were just holding it like that. But now you're able to see it. Okay, now what we know, we got ourselves a fault set. Well, now we need to start going to work. I mean, that really was the hard part. Now's the fun part, though. So we're going to move down the stack, just touching each pin until one of us cries out to us. And he's going to cry out to us just like pin number 2 is doing right there. When I put a little bit of upward pressure on my pick against pin number 2, you notice that the needle is moving up. It'll stop bouncing just a hair. I need a dampener on there. You see, he's telling us, he says, I'm the one. He's literally raising his hand. So what we'll do, if normally we were holding this in our hand, and we would release tension with our finger just a hair as we applied upward pressure on the pick, and we're going to let him go home. And that's just what happened. Now once we've done that, we're going to get a slightly deeper, if it'll stop bouncing, slightly deeper fault set. And now we got, what is it, about a -2. That's pretty deep fault set. Well, now we know we got 2 pins. Let's keep looking. Okay, we're starting the back, and I'm just going to move down the keyway until again someone raises their hand, and there he is pin 4. It says I'm the one, and we're going to apply a little upward pressure, and we're going to let pin 4 go home. Okay, now we lost a complete fault set, and what that tells me, we either overset him, or another pin has dropped, changing our fault set. And so what are we at, about a -2? That's still good. Okay, we still got the fault set. We are not, it's pin number 5 has not dropped back down, otherwise we'd be at 0. So now we're just going to continue going down the line, seeing who's going to raise their hand next. And there he is, pin 4 again. Okay, apparently I didn't set him very well. Okay, now we're back at 0. Well, if that happens, oops, I just touched that. I just touched him. If it had gone back to 0, the first guy to check would be pin 5, and I just barely bumped him with my pick, and that's exactly what had happened. He had dropped down, and when I pushed my pick back to the rear and touched him, he now gave us our fault set back. So now we're continuing down the stack. We're checking each pin, seeing who's going to raise his hand. And now you can see pin 3, as I apply pressure to pin 3, he's raising his hand. So we're going to position our pick on him, and we're just going to give a little upward pressure. We're going to let him go home. Okay, I want to position the pick very carefully. Don't commit until you know you got it on the right pin. Okay, now we're back at 0, and that should tell us, that's a good indication pin 5 has dropped back down. So I'm going to go to the back of the keyway, try to find pin 5, and then touch him and see if he had dropped back down. And indeed, that's what had happened. So now we got everybody set. We have perhaps 2 pins left. Okay, we're going to move down the stack. We're going to be looking for who's going to be wanting to be picked. And there he is, pin 3 again. A little upward pressure. Come on, go home. There you go. We're back at 0, so go back and check pin 5 and see if he is the one. And he was. Now we got our fault set back. So pin 5 on this lock is kind of like a gatekeeper. Okay, I'm back on the next pin. Let's see, who are we? What pin number are you? Let me check 1 just to check, make sure he's not hanging in there. We got a good fault set. Who needs to be picked? It's got to be at least one. So now I think you're starting to see what it is you're looking for as you're moving down the stack. There's no secret, you know, very mysterious thing that I do with my finger. It's really the lock doing all the work for you. Okay, where are you? Okay, looks like could be up there, pin number 1, which of course is always the hardest one to get at. Let me see if that, let me check the stack just to be sure before I start mashing on him. No, I got another one here. Looks like pin 4 again. Let's send him home. And we're back at 0, so we're going to check pin 5. No, not him. I must have overset pin 4, or perhaps not set him enough. There we go, I hadn't quite got him. So there we are, we're back in business. Keep looking, keep looking. A 5-pin lock. And I can't believe how hard it is when you can't use your own finger. Alright, what do we got here? Pin 3 again. Put a little pressure on him. Okay. Check pin 5. We're back at 0. What have we done here? Okay, with pin 5. Now who's next? Pin 2 feels like. Okay, we're back at 0, so check pin 5. And that's what it was. Okay, we're definitely out of sequence here. So I had either set somebody out of sequence, or we just got the binding order wrong altogether. Doesn't matter, because you just keep doing the same thing. Okay, we're back at 0, so we're going to check pin 5, and that's what he was. Pin 3, there's he's calling out to us. Come on, go home. Go home. You know you want to. You know, believe it or not, that washer is, in this point, just too much weight. I just can't overcome him. I'm going to have to pick up just a hair, take some of the weight off so I can set that pin. If I got him. Back at 0. Okay. Okay, let me take a little weight off of him just so I can set that pin. Just the washer. It's just too much. That washer is just too much weight to get pin number 3 to set. Anyway, fellas, there you go. It was a much bigger ordeal here than it is in real life because I couldn't sense it with my own finger. But don't be intimidated by spool pins. They're absolutely not hard. In fact, I love spool pins because they tell you when they need to be picked. They make our job a lot easier. So don't be intimidated by them. Now I hope with this little device here, now you know what it is you're trying to feel for, and you know when these pins are talking to you and begging to be picked. Anyway, I hope that was helpful to somebody. Anyway, thanks for your time. Everybody stay safe and stay legal.